Okay, this next one is a building up to problem in 9J, and I first want to look at example 14 for its definition. Now, this says, here's an argument, because it has an implication in it. If the communists win the election, I will leave the country. I am not leaving the country, therefore the communists will not win the election. This is a particular kind of argument called a syllogism. And it's what I'm more familiar with when we talk about arguments is this kind of argument. You have statements, and then there's a therefore statement. And the way we structure this to prove it or disprove it, or show if it's valid or not, is we take the conjunction of every statement leading up to the one that says therefore, and then test whether or not the conjunction of all of those implies the statement that comes after it, using implication as from the previous section. So in this example, you see that spelled out. I'm going to do a different example. I'm going to do an example from the homework in this section of another syllogism. I'm going to look at 9J. Let's go forward here into section 9J. And I'm going to look at number 4. Let's make it a little bigger. All right, here's number 4. If you like music, then you will go to tonight's concert. If you go to, that's a statement. It's an implication, but it's a statement. If you go to tonight's concert, then you will buy some CDs. That's another statement. You do not buy CDs. That's a third statement. And finally, we get to the therefore, you do not like music. Okay. Now, that's the structure of an argument. Thing, 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 and then an implied thing. That's what we're looking at. Statements that come before are called the premises, and the one that comes after the word therefore is called the conclusion. We want to see if the conjunction of the premises implies the conclusion. Okay. Now, I made up a worksheet for this. That would be make it a little easier. I've structured it all out here, where I've gone ahead and made each of the statements a letter. Well, P is, I like music. All right. Q was, I go to the concert. And the next one was, I buy CDs. B-U-Y. CDs, okay? So these are what are simpler statements that are folded up into these statements that we had. The first one said, if I like music, then I go to the concert. So I said, okay, I'll make P, I like music, Q, I go to the concert, P implies Q. That's my first statement of the premises. Then if I like music, if I go to the concert, then I will buy CDs. That's the second one, okay? So if Q, then R. Now, the third one is, I do not buy CDs. And we're going to see, does that allow us to conclude that I do not like music? Okay, so that's what we're going to figure out. We're going to write each one of these in its own column and see if all of these conjuncted together imply this or not. So I want to build this up. I want P implies Q. Okay, well, by now we know how that works. If the premise, or the antecedent here, I should call it, the premises are what we have in our argument here. If the antecedent is false, the implication is automatically true. So everywhere else I'm looking at starts with a true antecedent. Now I look at the consequent, and this one mirrors that column. It's true when the consequent is true, and false when it's false when the antecedent is true. So that's my implication, P implies Q. Now let's look at Q implies R. Okay, same deal. If I go through the Q column, and anywhere it's false, I make my implication true, half the work's done. Now everywhere else in here, Q is true, now I look at R. If R is true, my implication is true. If it's false, it's false. So down here, true and false. Okay, great. Those are the first two premises. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the third premise in here, which is the negation of R. All right, the negation of R flips all the truths to F's and all the F's to truths. So it has the same sort of pattern, just shifted, flopped the other way. Now, if I look at this is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3, in this third column I can look at 1 and 2 and 3. I'm going to conjunct all three of them. You say, how can I do that? Well, in fact, that's one of the problems you're asked to do. It's done in 9H number 1. It shows that the conjunction of these three is actually the same whether you group these two together first or these two together first. It doesn't matter. We don't really need the parentheses for a triple conjunction. All we do is use the same rules as before. If any of them is false, the conjunction is false. So let's start with number 1. Anywhere this is false, my conjunction is false. So everywhere I see an F here, I get an F there. So far, so good. Now I move to the next one. Number 2, anywhere there's a false, I put a false. Okay, so the first 2 are true in the remaining spots. I look at number 3, and if it's false, well, my conjunction's false. There is one place where all 3 of them are true. Okay, right at the bottom row. That's it. Oh, what about up here? Well, the negation bar is false, so the conjunction is false. So I have mostly falses there, 1 true at the bottom. Okay. Now, that is the conjunction of all of these. Okay. Now I want to see, does that imply not the negation of P? Well, I need to write up the negation of P. The negation of P flips these first T's to F's and the second F's to T's. All right, now I'm ready to look at the implication. Does this, we'll call that number 4, does 4 imply not P? Okay? All right, well, remember now, everywhere the antecedent is false, I get a true implication. So lots of trues come in here. And then to the last one, this is true, and this is true, so this is true. So they're all true, so it's a tautology, right? So it's a tautology, that means the argument is valid. All right? If we had even one F over there, if it's not a tautology, then it's invalid. It doesn't have to be a contradiction to be invalid. Just even one F would be enough. This points out that this is a valid argument. These sequence of steps and that example, that syllogism is valid. So that's the example number 4 in 9J.